Hey mystical illuminations, my name is Jax Atlantis, and today we're going to be talking about Pluto in the second house. Thank you guys so much for being so patient, as I was not able to create a weekly Pluto video in the last couple weeks. From here on out, I will be releasing these videos on Thursdays. So for the last two videos, we talked about the Pluto in the first house and Pluto in the seventh house. And with Pluto in the first house, we were going over the expression of the identity of Pluto. Basically, when you have Pluto directly tied to your individuation and the way that you express your individuality into this world, the way that it magnetizes people to you, and the way that you have to basically go on your own journey to find out how it is exactly you can be in healthy relationships in which you are both respected for your individuality, at the same time able to express it, and doing so without essentially being dominated or dominating the other person, to a degree that's unhealthy, or to a degree in which one or both parties are not being met. As we talked about Pluto in the seventh house, we then talked about how you are a natural at the congregation of relationships, the connection between you and another person. This is totally natural to you, almost to a magical degree. You have essentially a superpower with building relationships, and so your lesson is the exact opposite. It's about being able to find your way through life without relationships, being able to be in relationships in such a way that you are not losing your identity along the way. So as we talk about Pluto in the second house, we want to talk a little bit about, what the second house is and its connection and its analogy to Taurus. With the second house, we immediately think financial security. And that's correct, especially in the modern context. That's how we're going to be thinking about the second house. However, it's really important to rewind the clock back. Whenever I teach astrology, I always talk about astrology in context to cave people. And people sometimes wonder why exactly I put so much emphasis on that. And that's because actually of Taurus and Aries. These two signs in particular make less sense in the modern context unless you oversimplify them. For example, with Aries, the warrior, in what context do we, are we all walking around with swords and shields? Of course not, not anymore. At the same time, Aries, of course, is an archetype of individual expression. It's the burgeoning spark of consciousness and masculinity. And in a world that is so digitalized, it's sometimes hard to empathize with what exactly the use for Aries is or was. And so I like to normally talk about that. But with Taurus, what gets lost, I think, a lot of the times is that we take the financial aspect as very literal, that it's about the money. It's not about the money exactly. And when we talk about Pluto in the second house and having essentially a soul lesson that is around the second house, it's not just the pursuit of finances. It's not just the potential obsessive pursuit of finances. Though those can be manifestations, it's really important to understand exactly what the second house came from, what exactly it meant backwards in time. So when you think about Taurus, it's about survival. It's about being able to survive. It's about being able to prosper. It's about being able to be abundant. And back in time, it makes a lot more sense because everything was very literal. Before there was, a coin or a dollar to represent wealth itself, everything was essentially objects. It was like you had X amount of furs or X amount of fish, X amount of, maybe precious gemstones, which you could trade. But the entire idea behind Taurus was survival, having all of the things and the possession of financial security. Not just financial security in the ability to barter and trade, but physical security. Because of course, where you have the most objects, you have the most power, when especially in context to other people and social groups. And the natural Venusian connection between Taurus and of course Libra is the ability to work with other people. With Taurus, it's the independent journey and valuing the self in context to other people. With Libra, it's very literally valuing other people and being valued by other people, and it becomes more ideological. So when you think about Taurus, you think about the second house, and you think about having Pluto there, having a soul lesson around physical security, financial security. This is first and foremost about survival. Now, when we step into the modern age a little bit, it then becomes a little bit odd, because you don't exactly need to be wealthy in order to survive, in order to physically just not die. You don't require wealth per se. However, you of course need food, you need water, and you need all the other, shelter. You need all of the different components that come with that. And of course, where you have Pluto in the second house, you have an extreme energy that is around the second house. You're then going to be looking for the acquisition of the power that comes with having a lot of wealth. And sometimes that wealth is just taken very literally, and sometimes it manifests very literally, but it's important to understand that there's a million ways that can actually manifest. For example, with the survival instinct connected to Taurus, we got to remember that procreation is there as well. We look at Taurus's opposition Scorpio, we immediately think of the sexual aspect of Scorpio. We think of sex when we think of Scorpio in the 8th house. But when we look at the second house, we look at Taurus, we have the procreation aspect of survival, the survival of the species. Also, when we have Pluto in the second house, we have an energy that comes up around, for example, sex being treated as an object of trade. So with Pluto in the second house, a Taurus, even if they're not a Taurus, someone with Pluto in the second house might think of sex as something that they can trade for a relationship with someone who they believe will give them financial or physical security. That sex is an object that they can trade back and forth. And so it's really important to stay very mindful of that when we think of Pluto in the second house. What exactly do you believe that you can possess? In what way do you think that it's appropriate to possess that? And what things can't you possess? Because when we're hit with the 8th house opposition, this is where we're definitely going to find out the things you can't possess. For example, you can't possess another person, and sex is not an object. Perhaps the act of sex can be treated or traded as an object, but the actual connection, the soul merging, the true intimacy that happens, the sensuality, these things can't be captured or just simply traded. There's a difference between something that is transactional and a difference between something that is desired mutually between two forces. So with Pluto in the second house, these tend to be themes that will come up a lot in your life. They will be things about, are you going to die if you lose everything? Like, is it the end of your life if you lose all of your things? What about relationships in which there is a crystal clear connection between the power that you have or don't have in a relationship versus who is providing the physical things in the relationship? When it comes to your own sort of mission in your journey, there's also an aspect of reality here, like with all the earth signs. You've got Virgo has a very clear understanding of the aspect of present reality based on current data, whereas Capricorn, is able to look over the past and that which is traditional, and it's able to try and manufacture through the earth power what is going to be the future based on the past. And with Taurus, you have this fixed energy. So you have fixed traditions. You have a fixed idea of discernment about what is valuable in reality. Are you valuable in reality? And so in Pluto in the second house, you're going to be facing a lot of times people being objectified. You will see that experience a lot. You yourself might have people that come into your life who essentially just attempt to objectify you. You might yourself put yourself in the position to be objectified on some sort of consistent basis or with some sort of intention, even because you think that might be the way that you have to experience this. And so it's so powerful with Pluto in the second house, as eventually it reaches, towards the finish line, and it starts to notice, as it faces the 8th house, wait a minute, my attraction towards the idea of this power might be in itself the very thing keeping me from that. That if I actually was satisfied with what I had, or basically not coming from this place of total and complete fear around the acquisition of things, the acquisition of money, then I might actually, in a way, be able to have more of it. I might be able to have more of it because I'm not constantly in a cage from the fear of not having it. And so basically what's going to happen, especially from the spiritual place of the 8th house and your opposition, you're going to see all of the things that you can't possess, or you will possess, in a very literal sense, all the things you thought that you wanted. And then you're going to meet someone who is an 8th house representative who shows you, well, you can have all of those things all day, but it's not going to bring you actual fulfillment. Like, yes, you will survive, but you won't be living. You won't be enjoying your life. And so being able to find that balance, being able to find the power between the 2nd and the 8th house in a place of harmony, and understanding all of the ways in which you are not an object. The thing is, though, you are definitely going to be someone who has the magnetic power of Pluto in this particular area, which means you will be attracted, you will find yourself in situations around very wealthy and very powerful people. You will attract them to you as well without even intending to. And you will be put in a lot of positions in which you face the 8th house and the use of other people's power as something that you possess because you're in some way connected to them. And so those are some of the most intense lessons that you can face with Pluto in the 2nd house. And so remembering that, your value of the self, one of the greatest lessons of Taurus in that particular octave of Venus is understanding that you do have value. That's part of the ultimate power of Taurus, is knowing that because I'm worth it, because, I myself am valuable before, during, and after any of the gaining or loss of any of these things, that I am a treasure, that I essentially possess the treasure because I am that treasure in particular. So with Pluto in the 2nd house, it's not something that's going to be easy financially, even if you were born wealthy. It's going to be difficult because there will be an entire soul lesson around this. And if you, for example, don't find out through your own sort of mining or digging through your own subconscious and realize that that money is not going to bring you happiness, you will eventually reach a 8th house roadblock that will in some way shock or take away these different things. For example, if this was Pluto in the 2nd house, you just found yourself around the right people. They hooked you up because you had these connections. You got this incredible job. It paid incredibly well. It would be the loss of that job that will teach you that if you were not on track to learning that yourself. If you have these different connections and these different people who you feel create a wealth for you, or you think that through your connection to them you will always have all the things you need, essentially your survival will be based on the continued relationship with these connections. Some of those connections will for sure be lost. One way or the other, the universe will catalyze a situation in which the physical things are detached from the false meaning or the false attachment that you may have had to them and what they represent. The idea is that you yourself can survive. You yourself can survive, and as long as you recognize that you are essentially your own physical security. And the illusion that comes from physical security, or the illusion of physical security that you might have around other people, will sometimes catalyze situations in which you have some sort of grand hiatus from them, or a breakup, or an end of a friendship. So these are some pretty radical things to face. They're not easy to experience. They're not easy to go over. And when you get to, the opposite, because next week we're going to talk about Pluto in the 8th house. We're going to be looking at Pluto in a place where it's among all of the things that cannot be possessed, and yet in a way provoke the feeling of the maximum desire to possess, or while Pluto is essentially in the spirit realm, while it's in the underworld, it is going to experience all of these beauteous things that more than anything you might desire to possess. And it's going to be talking about the move towards the second house. It's going to be moving away towards the enmeshment and essentially the obsessive connections, and more so towards the independent journey towards creating your own physical security. All in all, though, just remember, Pluto in the second house is some of the most powerful soul lessons there are around physical security, whereas Pluto in the 8th house is going to be some of the most powerful lessons there are around emotional and spiritual security. So I hope that this has helped today. This Pluto in the second house is definitely a really intense one. I would love to see your guys' comment below and tell me about some of the experiences you had. I really loved seeing in the last 2 videos that we had some people that were Pluto 1st house people, Pluto 7th house people, and some of the experiences you've had with that, because it definitely can be really validating to find out that Pluto and its particular house placement actually has a massive effect on your life. In the ballpark of the massive effect that your rising or your sun placement has. And so it's something really interesting to uncover and go over, especially when it's kind of left behind sometimes. Now, the week before last, I had put out an extended audio for the 1st and 7th house Pluto placements. This is definitely something I recommend if you have either of those placements. Check it out on clearsightconsulting.net. Also on clearsightconsulting.net, I have my new class, the Astrologer Rising course. I just am about to finish up a class, the very first class of 2021. On December 1st, and I'm going to be starting the class of 2022 on December 1st as well. So for the Astrologer Rising course, this is going to be a 16-week class where every week I'm going to put out a lesson about how to become an astrologer, how to use astrology, how to think like an astrologer, how to go over, of course, the planets, the signs, and the houses, and their application to reading natal charts, to the creation of horoscopes. So I'm really excited to do that. Also, we have a weekly live Q&A in this class, and you guys can find a link to that at clearsightconsulting.net. So I look forward to talking to all of you next week. I'm going to be releasing this on Thursday morning. We're going to be going over Pluto in the 8th house. It's a very exciting placement of all the different Pluto placements, but I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I will talk to you all very soon.